Otherwise, I will be fired. Oh, look at all the people coming in. Welcome. Welcome to the Thomas Hatsis. Excited for this one. Of course, you got the Grimerica guys are here hosting this one. Myself, Darren, and Graham.
Hello.
If you want to do some background on Thomas after this fantastic summit is over, you can head over to grimerica.ca. And we've got two. We did, I think they were both in like 2017 or something. We did those interviews, Thomas?
Yeah, something like that.
Actually, no, I think one was 2018.
Eating shrooms and riding brooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
That's right. We snuck in together talking about witchcraft, but they always ended in psychedelics.
Yeah.
So here we are. I mean, it really couldn't work out a better way. We got the participants coming in. If any of the participants want to let us know where they're from, we'll give you a shout out. Where's everybody from today? Oh, there's the chat there.
San Diego. Oh, I see. Look at that.
We got San Diego.
Yeah.
San Diego.
America.
Vancouver.
Vancouver,
Sweet.
BC. That's where Graham's from. Yeah, probably raining. Daniel from San Rafael, Colorado. Jamie from Colorado.
Oh, Victoria too. South Beach, Scranton.
Sweden. Nice.
Nice.
Scranton, Pennsylvania. Wow, I wonder if that's where Michael Scott's from. Right? From The Office, the paper company. Sweden. Wow. Stephen City. Tell me more about the riding brooms and eating shrooms.
That'll be episode 317 and 141 on our on the grimerica.ca. That's the episodes we had Thomas on.
Also, I apologize to everybody. I forgot to get a cup, so I'm going to be drinking out of this. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's a big old bottle.
Yeah, big old jug.
Scranton paper party don't stop. We got John from Texas, Saul from Australia.
Whoever's in Scranton, they should look up Michael Wan. He lives near there. He was writing up some conspiracies on his Instagram about Scranton.
We got Dorothy from Stephen City, Pedro from Mexico, Candace from, I don't know what that says, Pennsylvania someplace. What is it? Hi. South Beach, Miami.
Chile.
Got a couple more down here. Love from Tulum. Wow, that's a weird synchro for me.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Personal one that I'm not going to talk about on the show. North Carolina. I'm going to have trouble forgetting that this isn't my show too. So, Thomas Hatsis, fantastic cat. We fell in love with Thomas when we had the first interview with him. We had a great time. I believe we've ran into that through the publicists over at Inner Traditions, and we've sort of stayed in contact with Thomas ever since. And yeah, we have these great chats. Like I said, we originally started talking about witches from the witches ointment, and we went straight to psychedelics. And here we are, a couple of experienced psychonauts and Graham. But that's good. You're an ex-psychonaut. Yeah. That's right. So about Thomas Hatsis is a public speaker and psychedelic historian, the author of 3 books in psychedelia: The Witch's Ointment, The Secret History of Psychedelic Magic, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, Spirit Plants, Magical Practices, Ecstatic States, and Microdosing Magic, a psychedelic spellbook. He also has 3 published articles in the Psy Press UK and 1 in the Journal of Psychedelic Studies. Forthcoming books include Contra, The Sacred Mushroom Question, Wonder Child, LSD in the Fantastic 50s, and Psychedelic Witch, Deeper Secrets of Entheogenic Occultism, co-authored with Eden Woodruff. Along with Woodruff, Hatsis runs Sanctum Psychedelia, a psychedelic harm reduction and education group, and organizes the Gaian Mind Psychedelic Conference in Portland, Oregon.
Nice.
Seems like Oregon could use more psychedelics.
Also, don't forget about the questions at the end. And
yeah, that's right. So we've got this, we got the chat. There's also the Q&A thing at the bottom. Do I have to open that? So if you guys want to, if you think of any questions throughout and you're worried that you might forget them or something like that, you can feel free to type them in the little Q&A tab at the bottom, and we'll get to those at the end. And then also at the end, if you just go into if you put your hand up in the participants area, there's a way to put your hand up. I don't know how to do it, but if you do that at the end, we're going to leave 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'll see you got your hand up somehow, and I'm going to let you. And if you want to ask Thomas the question yourself, you can do that. And if you would rather just type it out and have Grammar I read it for you because you're a little nervous, that's fine too. We want no judgment here. So without further ado, Thomas Hatsis.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here and listening. It's not easy to show up to a psychedelic conference as the heretic when talking about mushroom lore, so I really, really do appreciate everyone having an open mind and being cool. A few things I'd like to say first off the top is that I may or may not be able to get my slides to work. So this might be a very short talk with a big Q&A section, but hopefully I can get my slides to talk and we'll still have Q&A as well. Another thing, I used to believe wholeheartedly in everything I'm about to argue against. And I just want to bring that up to say that I am flexible enough to change my mind when somebody shows me evidence. Last thing, what we're going to be discussing today is history and what we can know about what happened in the past. Historians, in fact, use scientific methods to gauge historical probabilities. So this talk is not going to be about my beliefs at all. It's not designed to make anybody feel great. It's just history. It's cold. It doesn't care because it's just history. So it's just the facts we're going to deal with today. Now, I say this with complete awareness that mycologists, anthropologists, chemists, and philosophers have all weighed in on this discussion. I just want to say right now, for this talk, we are not going to concern ourselves with any of their opinions. We're just going to stay with historical facts and evidence. Let's see. So before we even get into the art, it's important to understand that while there are a number of problems just historically with the holy mushroom, I only have time to get into 3, but there are way more. And what they show is that even before you get into the art, there's no grounds for there to even be a mushroom in Christian art. So the first problem that they have is that there actually isn't any evidence for this claim. Now, I'm aware that people have thrown up many images to say, oh, this is a mushroom and that is a mushroom. The thing is, what they don't realize is that none of that actually counts because they don't have corroborating evidence to support the claim. What I mean by that is they don't have anything outside the art that points to the art to say, yeah, those are mushrooms. So there's not like a diary entry or a letter or a treatise or a proclamation or a gospel or even a love note that says anywhere that anyone was painting mushrooms in Christian art. Now, let me back up a second. Last month, I was in England for Breaking Convention, and I got to debate my friend Jerry Brown. And when I brought up this point that there are no written references to this, is that still going? Did I lose you guys?
You're good.
There. Okay, cool. When I brought up that there were no written references to these mushrooms, that he brought up 2 works which I just want to discuss briefly so that, you know, we can kind of just deal with it. The first is Augustine, who later became St. Augustine's De Moribus Manichaearum. And in this book, it does mention reference mushrooms that the Manichaeans would eat. However, it only says mushrooms in English. In Latin, it says boletus, which does mean mushroom, but it means medicinal, it means edible mushroom or a gourmet mushroom. In Latin, there are actually 2 different words for medicinal or psychoactive mushroom. One is fungos, where we get fungus, and the other is agarico, where we get, the fly agaric, for example. So Augustine had 2 opportunities to say psychoactive or medicinal mushroom, and instead chose the word that means dinner mushroom. The other reference that was brought up is to the Zohar. And while I agree with my friend that Abulafia does say that he had a vision of a mushroom while after drinking an opium-mixed wine, there's a big leap between that and actually people saying that there are mushrooms in art. And in fact, I will say again, there are no references anywhere to this. Even the 2 examples that have been brought up don't actually pass muster. Let's see. So that's our first historical problem, that there isn't actually any evidence for the mushroom in Christian art at all. There are only assertions that are made by people who are not historians. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just a fact. They are not historians, and they are just making assertions because they don't have any corroborating evidence. Now, there are different ways that the holy mushroom advocates excuse this lack of evidence. The conspiracy theorists will tell you that the mushroom was covered up by an elite group of power-hungry priests who have jealously guarded this secret for about 2,000 years. Not everyone who buys into the holy mushroom hypothesis goes for that conspiracy stuff, which is good because conspiracies of that magnitude don't ever actually work out in history. But this other group will say instead that the mushroom wasn't covered up at all, and that painting mushrooms in art was just a way to teach illiterate Christians the stories of Jesus. So this school of thought says that there was nothing wrong with this, so it wasn't covered up at all. Well, if that's true, why isn't this written down anywhere? You know, it's easy to say that something was, oh, it was fine. Well, the answer that they give is that it was too sacred to write about. I don't know, that doesn't sound very historically probable to me that something would be too sacred to write about, but not too sacred to paint in art, you know? But again, that's just me. Now, one of the problems we have with this, and maybe I could get this slide up, is that in my research, I've come to realize that Christians actually had no problem discussing psychedelic experiences, and in some cases created whole mystery traditions out of them. So whichever school of thought somebody has as to why there's no evidence, they're both pretty much totaled on this next point, which is that they did write about this stuff. And let me see if I can get this up, the slide here. Anywhere? Here we go. Can anyone see that? No?
I can only see darkness. I don't know. Maybe we could get, maybe someone else can see something.
No? Okay. Forget it. I was worried that would happen. So what I was about to put up on the slide was a passage from this anonymous tract called the Trudpeter Hohelied, which dates to 1160 of the Common Era, and offers us Christian psychedelic mystery symbolism using the Entheogen mandrake. No cover-ups or special pleading required. It reads, "The bark of mandrake brings intoxication. This root denotes God, the image of whom is Christ, for he is a medicine and a security for eternal life. The root's bark is the Holy Ghost, and he is the intoxicating drink." The great physician Paracelsus, himself a Christian, wrote openly of using cannabis and opium in his elixirs, many of which he drank himself. I don't have time to offer more examples, but in my book, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, I have 3 chapters that go over the different ways Christians use psychoactives at different times in history. And so that actually brings us to our second historical problem, which piggybacks off the first, which is that while Christians left us absolutely no evidence whatsoever for a holy mushroom, they left us plenty of evidence for entheogenic experiences with cannabis, opium, mandrake, and henbane. So you see there's a large disconnect there. You can share the screen on it using the, someone is trying, yeah, okay, never mind. They were trying to get me to get the slides to work. Yeah, we tried, it didn't. So I'll just keep moving on to the third problem. The third problem in history, and it's actually a big problem, is that holy mushroom advocates never bring up the Protestants or the Protestant Reformation and how bloody and brutal that was. They never bring up the Hussites or the Pastoraux or the Crusade against the Cathars or the Inquisition against the Waldensians. They don't bring up any of these examples from Christian history that were so bloody and brutal. As you all know, the Christian story is one of tremendous upheaval and human devastation. And yet, what holy mushroom advocates are asking us all to believe is that while this priestly class disagreed on every jot and tittle, bickering over every Christian doctrine, oftentimes leading to violence, sometimes leading to murder, somehow somehow, these power-hungry, frustratingly celibate old men who couldn't agree on anything all agreed we should not talk about the holy mushroom. And they also agreed that we especially better make sure we don't leave any writing so as to even teach Christians how to do this properly. I ask you, does anybody think that that is historically possible, like at all? The thing is, there isn't any room for the holy mushroom in Christian history if you know even a little bit about Christian history. The mushroom in Christian art fits into the history of Christianity as easily as Taco Bell fits into the Civil War. And now I'm sure many of you, when I just, there's no Taco Bell in the Civil War. Yeah, because you all know something about American history. So when somebody says that, that just sounds ridiculous. Well, to people that know about Christian history, the idea of there being mushrooms in Christian art sounds just as absurd. Now, with this in mind, let's get into the Christian art. This is going to be tough because I can't show you any of the pictures. So let me see what we can do. All right, I'm going to have to do something I wasn't planning on doing, which is offer another historical problem that doesn't deal with the art at all. A fourth historical problem is the state of textual transmission and copying in the ancient world. I'm going to take a sip of water and tell you what I mean by that in just a moment. My big jug here.
Is your presentation on a website or anything, Thomas? Maybe I can try and share it from my end.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Sorry, guys. So what I was saying, one of the fourth historical problem is textual transmission and copying in the ancient world. Now, what I mean is, so let me give I'm going to give a hypothetical example. Let's say you have Diana, who lives in Thessaly. Thessaly is a city on the eastern coast of the Grecian mainland. And Diana has heard stories about Jesus from the Gospel of John. And she's heard these stories, she really likes them. And so she wants a copy of the Gospel of John. So she finds somebody that has a copy of the Gospel of John, and she asks to copy it out. She's an aristocratic woman, so she can read and write. So she copies out this Gospel of John, right? And she makes a few errors in her copying, because if you're going to copy out any long, manuscript, you're bound to make a mistake or two. So how many copies of the Gospel of John are there right now? Well, there are two copies in Thessaly, both with a couple of mistakes. Now, the reason this is important is that John Marco Allegro, the guy who invented the holy mushroom hypothesis, he didn't really say much about there being a mushroom in Christian art. He actually only thought one image was a mushroom, and he didn't say too much about it. His entire premise and this entire historical idea, or it's not really a historical idea, this entire premise is based off the fact that there were supposedly hidden references to mushrooms, not in art, but in texts in the Bible. The reason I bring this up is that means that those mistakes Diana made while she was copying out her manuscript are crucial because you're hiding, different codes in the text. So what happens is now Diana takes a business trip to Rome, right? And while she's in Rome, she meets a guy named Marcus. Now, Marcus has also heard stories from the Gospel of John, and he really likes them. So he asked Diana if he can copy out her manuscript. But the thing is, John had also heard other stories about Jesus that hadn't circulated in Thessaly yet. They had only made their way around Rome. So he decides he wants to add those to his manuscript. So now how many copies are there of the Gospel of John? There are 3. There's the original, there's Diana's, and now there's the one with Marcus's, who inevitably made mistakes and added new stories. But now Marcus, he decides he's going to take a vacation to Anatolia to see an old friend, right? And his old friend's name is Cyrus. And he's hanging out with Cyrus. They're having some beer, maybe smoking some cannabis. And Marcus starts talking about the Gospel of John. And Cyrus is like, wow, this stuff is great. I've actually heard some stories myself about this Jesus character. Would you mind if I copied this out and I add some of mine? Marcus says, of course not. So Cyrus copies it out and, of course, makes mistakes. How many different copies are there now of the Gospel of John?
4.
Thank you. Yeah. And they all say different things. Some of them have different stories. Some of them have just mistakes. And some of them have mistakes and different stories. It would literally be impossible to transmute a message selected in code with that kind of chaos in the copying and transmission practices. Now, that was a hypothetical. I'm going to now offer an example from history. There was a guy named Tatian who wrote a book called The Diatessaron. Oh, excuse me, not Tatian. Tatian was the Syrian bishop who wanted them burned. This book, The Diatessaron, the person who's wrote its name is escaping me at present. I apologize. I wasn't ready to give this part of the talk. I'm sorry. This guy wrote a book called The Diatessaron. The Diatessaron means through the four. Oh, yes, it was Tatian, and Theodor was the bishop, so it was Tatian, sorry. Tatian wrote this book called The Diatessaron, that means through the four. Now, through the four, well, what is the four? That's the through, it's the four different gospel stories, so Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So why was Tatian trying to harmonize these together? Because there were so many differences. He was looking at all these different manuscripts of all these different gospels. Remember, there wasn't a Bible yet. All these individual gospels and the letters of Paul all exist as individual works at this point. Right? So Tatian decides he wants to harmonize them. Well, there was a Syrian bishop named Theodor in the 5th century who found this practice heretical, trying to harmonize the Gospels, found it heretical. So he ordered the Diatessaron collected and burned, and even bragged that he had burned 200 copies himself. And yet, despite Theodor's best efforts, despite the best efforts of others just like him, the Diatessaron comes down to us today almost fully intact. How? Because of the state of textual transmission in the ancient world and copying. If somebody wanted to write a gospel of the holy mushroom, they simply would have done so. This idea of an elite group of priests, jealously guarding the secret of the mushroom is preposterous. If you study history and you see that a lot of these church fathers really didn't like each other very much at all. And that's another historical problem with the holy mushroom, is that nobody ever used this as a slander. Here are some of the topics that different Christians use to slander each other. I mean, other church fathers slandering other church fathers. Rape, incest, pedophilia, thievery, murder. But we better not bring up the holy mushroom because that could ruin a guy's reputation, right? I mean, does that make any sense at all? Of course not. Another historical problem we have is the development of Christian apologetics. One of the reasons, or one of the ways, the Christianity that survived today as Orthodox, you remember in the ancient world there were many competing Christianities. The one that survived today as Orthodoxy, one of the ways they survived is because they developed what was called apologetic writings. Apologetic writing just means a defense of the faith. Now, there were many things that Christians were accused of when they first entered the scene in the 1st century of the Common Era. You have to understand, they were despised by their neighbors. They were despised by their Jewish neighbors, their pagan neighbors. Everybody hated Christians. So they came up with all these ways to defend their faith. Some of the things they were defending themselves against were cannibalism, incest, pedophilia. But again, they never felt the need to defend themselves against the holy mushroom. Why? Well, because this is a made-up topic. Without my ability to show slides, I'm going to just have to jump right into my conclusion. Sorry.
That's okay. That'll leave us plenty of time for just shooting crap.
Okay, so quick trip. Yeah, that'll definitely leave us a lot of time. Sorry, everybody. I am not a technically proficient individual. Oh. In 1539, Nicholas Copernicus updated his Facebook status. It's one of those rare facts of history, but the internet actually did exist in the 16th century. And so Mr. Copernicus, and I would have put this on a slide, but I have it here. Mr. Copernicus made a Facebook post which read, "I do believe, and my calculations doth convey, much to the contention of my peers, that we liveth not in a geocentric universe, but rather a heliocentric universe. And lo, 'tis true it is not the sun that revolveth around the earth, but the earth that revolve around the sun. Well, you could imagine the comments on his thread. Every insult was thrown at this heretic for daring to use scientific methodology to dismantle popular culture and popular consensus. And so instead of just listening to what Copernicus had to say, what everybody did in those days was they just Googled their favorite opinions. Luckily, we don't live in that world anymore, but this is the 16th century. Believe it or not, that's what people did when met with a fact that didn't, sit well with them. So they would Google their opinions, and those opinions made them feel very warm and fuzzy inside. And it made them feel like they were in on the conspiracy, like they knew the secret. Of course the sun revolves around the earth, duh. Everybody knows that, you crazy Copernicus. Now, I'm obviously not comparing myself to Nicholas Copernicus. I am commenting on the way people consume information in the 21st century. We are actually living at a time when we can Google ourselves into believing that the world is flat. So how do we combat this? Carl Sagan had a method he came up with called the baloney detection method. And it's just a handful of questions that we should all ask ourselves whenever we meet with people claiming that the earth is flat, or that there are reptilian overlords, or that there are mushrooms in Christian art, or that there are any mushroom conspiracies in Christianity whatsoever. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, how reliable is the source? Well, all these books that are out today that discuss the mushroom and Christian art are basing it solely off John Marco Allegro. John Marco Allegro has been discredited for over 30 years now. He was discredited just as soon as his book came out. He's often today mistakenly called a biblical scholar, and he absolutely was not a biblical scholar. And if you read his book, it's very obvious that he wasn't a biblical scholar. He was a philologist of comparative Semitic languages, and he was definitely brilliant at that, don't get me wrong, but when you read his book, it becomes obvious he didn't know anything about Christian history. So every book that is basing their ideas off these claims, it all falls apart. Even authors who think they're not basing their ideas off his claims fall due to this. The second question we should ask ourselves is, does the source make similar claims? Meaning, do all these books all kind of say the same thing? Yes. They all say that not only there are mushrooms in Christian art, but also there were mushrooms at Eleusis in the Kaikion. And Soma was really a mushroom, and Santa Claus was really a mushroom. And if I would have had my slides working, I could have showed you why Santa Claus isn't based off a mushroom at all. And so the thing is that's funny about this particular point is, in what these holy mushroom advocates, with them constantly looking for mushrooms all over the ancient world, and in Christian art, I should say rather, they miss the bountiful references to cannabis and opium and mandrake and henbane. So it's a funny irony of this whole thing. Point number 3 of our baloney detection kit. Have the claims been verified by anyone else? Not really. What you get in with a lot of these books is what my friend Cody calls the citation circle jerk, which is just a bunch of scholars kind of citing themselves and each other, but never actually going for primary source records. Now, when they do go for primary source records like Augustine and the Zohar, as we saw earlier, as it turns out, they're not actually talking about psychedelic mushrooms or painting those mushrooms in art. Let's see, question number 4. Does this fit in with the way the world works? Right, so does painting mushrooms in Christian art and covering it up or being too sacred to write about, does that fit in with how the world works? So I have 2 answers for this. There's a short answer and there's a long answer. The short answer is no. The long answer is fuck no. Question number 5. Has anybody tried to disprove this claim? Well, again, not really. We get into this, sorry, something came up here. We get into this citation circle jerk, and people aren't actually trying to disprove it. What they're doing is just looking.
What do you think he was going to say? Never click the thing on your screen.
Ignore the pop-ups.
That show my debate from last month, and you'll be able to see a lot of these slides. And
can you repeat that? Sorry, we lost you for a second there.
Probably about 20 seconds.
Okay.
From the moment something popped up on your screen.
Okay. I have no idea where I was going with that.
No, fuck no.
Just
after fuck no.
Right after fuck no.
Oh, okay. So
because it sounded like you said someplace people can go to see the slides, and we missed that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So what I was saying was that there's sorry. So the point 5 of the baloney detection kit was that, has anyone tried to disprove this claim? Well, I have, and Chris Bennett has, and going to be just honest, not to be a jerk, but I have not heard yet a good argument against anything I've said so far. And I've asked a lot of people, and I just haven't heard one yet. And I'm open to it. I really am. If there were mushrooms in Christian art, let me just say I would be the first person shouting from a mountaintop, telling everybody about this. So point number 6. Where does the preponderance of evidence point? So this is where the lack of evidence for the holy mushroom gets really sticky. You see, the holy mushroom hypothesis isn't even good enough to answer this question because there isn't any corroborating evidence. Again, without anything outside the art, they're all just assertions. 7, are the claimants playing by the rules of history? Well, no, they don't actually apply historical safeguards. Again, they are very smart mycologists, they are brilliant chemists, they're wonderful anthropologists, they're great people, philosophers, but they don't use the proper historical methods that guard us against BS. They don't do any of it. So, point number 8. Do the claimants provide positive evidence? Well, no, when they say that either the mushroom was covered up by an elite group of priests or that the mushroom was too sacred to write about, well, that's just negative evidence. That's saying I don't have any evidence at all. I have excuses for why I don't have any evidence. Number 9, does the new theory account for as many phenomena as the old theory? So not at all. So let's say, what I mean here is, that let's say there were a mushroom in 1 or 2, mosaics or frescoes or something. That does not override the complete historical silence of this practice of painting mushrooms in Christian art to teach people the stories of Jesus. It doesn't do anything for that. It just means that maybe oh, look, those are mushrooms. The person, and there aren't even any, we don't even have any of these yet, but even if there were paintings that had a mushroom or 2 in it, that's no guarantee that the artist even knew that they were psychedelic or would use them in such a way. It just, might be drawing something from the natural, world around. And finally, number 10, are personal beliefs driving the claim? Yes, every single person who supports the holy mushroom hypothesis is some kind of ex-hippie or psychonaut or something. And look, I count myself among these people. Mushrooms are my medicine of choice. But the difference between me and other people that research this topic is that when I'm doing history, I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just doing history. I'm just doing the science of history. All these other guys that are writing these books, John Rush, Clark Heinrich, Jan Irvin, they need this to be true because this is a religion for them. And if it's a religion for you or anybody that's listening, I don't mind that at all. I don't care. Definitely have a mushroom Jesus religion. But when you call it history, now you're on my turf. And if we're going to say that, if we're going to make a claim about history, we should check to see if it's factual. And there are no mushrooms in Christian art. There's not 100 of them. There's not 50 of them. There's not 20, 15, 10, 5, 2, or 1. There are none. And if I would have had slides, I would be able to demonstrate that even more for you. Thank you for listening.
Rogan's not doing you any favors.
Yeah, well, look, he has his perspective. I appreciate that he, that he does talk about psychedelics on his podcast. But he does, he has a blind spot for the holy mushroom hypothesis. But so do a lot of people. So it's fine.
It's funny because I've almost bought that book a couple of times. I've actually pulled it up and had it there in the eBay thing. And it seems overpriced. And for some reason, I just never bought it. Maybe this is why.
Which book?
The Mark Allegro one.
Oh, the Sacred Mushroom and the
Sacred
Cross?
Mushroom and the Holy Cross. I've almost
Yeah.
bought that book probably 8 times in the last 6 years.
Okay,
and
well,
I still have never purchased it.
I've read it 6 times, so I'll save you the trouble. Total horseshit.
So
But
I'm going to
read it, and check it out and see for yourself. It's very obviously written by a person with no concept of New Testament history or scholarship at all.
So we've got a question here from an anonymous attendee,
Of course.
Dan Merker, in his book, The Psychedelic Sacrament, Mana, Meditation, and Mystical Experience, explains that there is lyrical evidence of the use of psychedelics in Judeo-Christian traditions. Have you had an opportunity to investigate his work, given that it is textually based, not image-driven as other publications?
That's great. You know, I have it somewhere. I will try. Could you tell me where it's coming from by any chance? What the where the source is? Because I just need to say real quick. I read Merker's other work, The Mystery of Mana, and it's based on a lot of speculation. I'm not familiar with the passage you're talking about. I would have to read it. So, and let me also say this real quick. I'm not even saying Christians weren't eating mushrooms. I'm saying they weren't painting them in art. In fact, in my book, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, I have a brief part where I try to show where I think there is actually textual evidence for a Christian who ingested a mushroom. It isn't much, but it's something there. I'm just saying they weren't painting them in art. So I'll definitely check out that passage. And excuse me, I would ask if you'd be so kind, email me at psychedelicwitch.com, please, and let me know what that passage is, and I'd love to definitely, figure that out with you. That'd be great. Thank you.
We've got a question here from Michael G. What is the art on the cover of John Rush's book?
Oh, so those are, if I would have had time to show you, so those are the Parasols of Victory. If you have, John is this person's name?
John Rush's book. There's Michael G is the question.
Michael. Sorry about that, Michael. So Michael, break out. Do I have it here? Yes, hold on.
What I got? He's got it right there. You know where there is evidence of psychedelic mushrooms is in Super Mario.
Yeah, there's also evidence of psychedelic mushrooms in my stomach. Anyway, so here. Yeah, that's not going to work. It's too small. So these are all based off of the Parasol of Victory, Michael. What I would encourage you to do, and everybody, after I'm done, Google Assyrian Parasol or Babylonian Parasol of Victory, and you will see exactly what all these trees are actually based off. They're not based off of mushroom. They're based off of Parasol. Guarantee it. You will see the thing everybody else sees who takes this little test.
That actually wasn't bad when you held it up there. Do you mind holding it up just for another second?
Not at all. Okay, so then we can start with the fact that Amanita muscaria don't have branches. Now, what they say is that inside, this one,
back it up a bit right there. Yep.
What they're saying is that inside this one here, the one second to Jesus's right hand, at least from my angle, they're saying that inside that, those are little mushrooms. But if you look inside, they're actually little parasols. They have a nub at the top, and you can still actually see the tassels hanging out the bottom. Again, if I would have been able to have my slides up, I could show you tons of these. I was literally going to trace the evolution of the Parasol of Victory all the way up to Christian art to just show you how simple it is if you actually study art history, not conspiracy theories.
I think what we'll try and do is we'll try and find a way to get these slides into the forum later so that people can come back and take a look at them over the weekend.
Well, it's too late to do that because I would have had to explain them and go over what they are and everything. It just, whatever. I should have studied, how to use computers instead of history.
The history of computers. From Daniel Shankin. What about the Santa Claus stories? Are they true? Flying Reindeer and Chimney as the bridge between the worlds?
No, they're not true at all. And actually, that was what I was going to end this talk on. You know what? I should be able to, you need a lot of it, needs some slides, but some of it doesn't. So let me get over there. Actually, I don't need this. I could just say it off the top of my head. So the question is from Lord Shankin about the Santa Claus thing. So the flying reindeer. So one of the problems with the idea that the reindeer are based off of the Amanita muscaria mushroom is that in our earliest cultural mentions of reindeer in America, they don't fly at all. It's just a regular, it's actually just one reindeer, and it doesn't fly. Not only that, the reindeer wasn't originally the preferred method of transportation by Santa Claus. The earliest stories of him have him sailing in a ship, as it turns out, and at other times he rides in a car, other times he's on a bicycle, there's another instance when he's on a donkey. So the problem here is that people with this whole Santa Amanita muscaria thing, they have taken three separable lines of history and mashed them all together as if they ever existed together in history. Those three lines are the history of Nicholas, who became Saint Nicholas, the history of Siberian shaman reindeer herders, and the history of Santa Claus as a pop culture figure. All three lines of history never intersected with each other until the late 20th, early 21st century, when people just kind of started making these connections. One of the connections they try to make has to do with the red and white from Santa's costume. They say it's the red and white of the mushroom. So putting aside the fact that that is a terrible argument because correlation does not equal causation, we actually know historically where the red and white from Santa's outfit comes from. It comes from the Civil War. One of the earliest pictures we have of Santa Claus shows him feeding Union soldiers. And again, I had a slide for this. If you Google, though, Harper's Weekly Santa Claus, it should come up for you. And so in this image of Santa Claus on this cover of Harper's Weekly, Santa is wearing a star-studded jacket and striped trousers, right? And above his head waves the American flag. So Thomas Nast, the guy who drew this picture, was clearly comparing Santa Claus to the American flag. Now, what happened was, over time, after that, Santa Claus's outfit went through a variety of color changes. Sometimes it's red, white, and blue. Sometimes it's red, white, blue, and green. Sometimes it's red and black. Sometimes it's red and brown. Sometimes it's just brown. In 1931, Coca-Cola adopted Santa Claus as their spokes-elf, and so they dropped all the other color varieties and used only the red and white because they had been advertising using red and white for some time up to that point. So the red and white from Santa's outfit does not come from the Amanita muscaria. It comes from the history of an entire group of people brutalized by slavery in America. And when we were over at Breaking Convention, Danny Nemu brought up in his talk, psychedelic neocolonialism. That's exactly what's going on here. And the Santa mushroom connection, it's this odd mixture between Amerocentrism, because here's the thing, if you go to Russia, nobody has ever heard of the Santa Claus, Amanita muscaria, Siberian reindeer connection, or Siberian shaman connection. That is a made-up American thing, and it's only about 2 decades or so, or a little bit more than that, maybe 30 or so years old. That's about it. And I actually had 2 students that went to Moscow, and I said, I'm like, ask people about this. And nobody knows what we're talking about when we say that Santa's based off a mushroom. That's right, he's red and white, and he's attached to Siberian shaman reindeer herders. So this entire premise, sorry to get back to the point, is this odd mixture of Amerocentrism on one hand and psychedelic neocolonialism on the other. Very strange bedfellows. I wouldn't recommend it.
We got, what about images of Santa Claus prior to the Civil War?
Okay, show me images of Santa Claus prior to the Civil War with a mushroom. There aren't any. Show me any reference ever to Santa Claus with a mushroom that isn't only 30 years old or newer. Show me anything.
From Katie May?
Sure. Yeah, there were images of Santa Claus before the Civil War. I'll tell you one right now. A poem called Old Santa Claus with Much Delight, written in 1821, does show an image of Santa Claus. He has on this big Russian hat, and or Ukrainian hat, excuse me, and I think a green vest in one panel and a red jacket in another. There's also one of him putting presents on a tree where he's just kind of wearing almost like a... what would they call it? I remember those footsie pajamas we had as kids.
Like a onesie?
It's like Santa Claus in footsie pajamas hanging presents on a tree.
kissing mom. From Katie May, if Christians did take psychedelic mushrooms, why, in your opinion, did they not include them in art as compared with cannabis?
Because this is a new idea that nobody ever thought to do. Like I eat mushrooms myself. I have never painted a mushroom in Christian art in my life. And I've eaten a lot of mushrooms and I've never done that. Like, I don't like, there's just, sorry, I keep hitting this microphone. I don't even know really how to answer that question. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't have done it. It doesn't seem to have occurred to anybody. And I'm not even necessarily saying that they absolutely were eating mushrooms. I don't know. Again, they left us evidence for cannabis. They left us evidence for mandrake and a lot of evidence for opium. Christians loved opium. In fact, this Syrian bishop named Theodoret would smoke opium and then read from the Gospels. He rather enjoyed. He thought that it kind of focused him in on the holy doctrine. So Christians loved all this stuff, and they didn't have any problem writing about it or even recommending for people to use it. Origen, the first great Christian apologist, actually says to pagans converting to Christianity, he says, look, if you guys are ever feeling nostalgic for your own old pagan ways, don't go out and get drunk, don't go out and fornicate, don't worship the gods of old. Just take a large dose of mandrake and knock yourself into the Godhead. So, you know what I mean? Like, so they had no problem with this stuff. So I don't, when people say it was covered up, like, really, you should probably read some ancient texts, because they and medieval texts, they talk about this stuff. Or another thing I should say, to that last questioner, Chris Bennett's book, Liber 420, is probably the best book on the topic of Christians and Christian magicians and ceremonial magicians using cannabis in the Renaissance and early modern periods.
What does the mandrake equate to?
What's that?
What that you talked about mandrake?
Mm-hmm.
Taking mandrake, like what's the modern equivalent of that?
The modern equivalent of mandrake is taking mandrake.
Really?
I still take mandrake.
What's the experience like?
It's a little rough. I don't recommend it. So here, let me, this is a good time to give a story about the dangers of using the so-called hexing herbs. So I've been working with mandrake and henbane since 2005. So I could take an entheogenic dose of them, but that'll probably kill a person. The first time I inhaled a fumigation of mandrake, henbane, and cannabis, I almost killed myself back in 2005. Instead, my roommate and singer who lived with me at the time, we had a band and we played in the basement. It was awesome. She found me in my corner, naked, sweating, just kind of going like this on my face. And I don't remember any of this. So as I say to people that ask me this question, stick to the safe, illegal substances like mushrooms. Because mushrooms ain't going to kill you. Henbane will kill you. Mandrake will kill you. The effects, let's see. It's kind of, I have it now at a point, and you have to bear in mind that people back in the day grew up with this stuff, so they already had a tolerance to it. So people would drink, if you have about 2 grams of mandrake bark, you're going to feel like this kind of tipsy but euphoric. And one of my favorite things to do is you mix mushrooms with mandrake, and it's the closest thing to like taking MDMA that's natural you're ever going to get. But I don't recommend it because it is mandrake and you can kill yourself. So don't do it.
Stay away from the mandrake, people. Just stay on the mushrooms.
Learn from my mistake. I almost killed myself. It's seriously, don't just, mushrooms are awesome. Ayahuasca is awesome, and cannabis is great. And they're not going to kill you.
She should have taken a picture of you, because that would have been a great album cover. From Sean, what is the point of attempting to discredit this theory? How can you be sure the written history you study is the truest history? Well, my opinion is it's all fake. But.
Could you repeat that one last time? I'm sorry, because it was a 2-part question.
What is the point of attempting to discredit this theory?
Okay, let's stop right there. Hold on. The answer to that question, what's the questioner's name?
Sean,
the answer to that question is either truth matters to you or it doesn't. That's it.
How can you be sure the written history you study is the truest history?
I never said it was. What? No. What I'm saying is that I have looked through many, many, many ancient and medieval texts. I spent 10 years translating them from their original languages. I immersed myself in the thoughts of people living in that time as best as I could, digging up references to references to cannabis, mandrake, opium, and henbane, and not seeing anywhere where somebody would mention a mushroom, specifically in areas where they're talking about other psychedelics. That's why. It's just what I'm trying to say, and I said it before, and it's worth repeating. The idea of there being a mushroom in Christian art or Christian art history is akin to saying that Taco Bell was present at the Civil War.
Or that they had Facebook in 1600s.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't the whole point of archetypes and mushrooms that they permeate through into reality and resonate with us?
Tell that to the Greeks who ate mushrooms and then went out and slaughtered their enemy the next day. Tell that to the Egyptians who ate their mushrooms and went out and slaughtered the Assyrians and Babylonians. That's a brand new paradigm. The idea that mushrooms are all peace and love, yeah, they might be for me, they might be for you. They weren't for the ancient Greeks. They weren't for any of the ancient Mediterranean civilizations, who were all very nasty to each other.
Really, eh? Geez, a head full of mushrooms doesn't really make you want to go out and kill people.
No, me neither. But, that's because that's the paradigm we're living in.
The last time I think I had about 3.5 grams or so. And for whatever reason, we thought it was a good idea to put on Zeitgeist, the original Zeitgeist movie. And we got really into the music in the first part where they're comparing all the religions and everything, and everything's going great. We're not really paying attention to what's on the screen. We're just rocking out to the music, because Peter Joseph has some great music in there. And then it transitions into the 9/11 part, and it's all troops marching and tanks going off and all this stuff. And me and my buddy Joey were jumped up and scrambling around this place so much, just trying to shut it off or just get rid of it. It blows me away that you could get into that mind state.
Sure.
We have another question from the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I second Sean's question. Is the whole effort here to discredit the idea of mushrooms in Christian history?
No, the point here is to learn the truth about entheogens in Christian history. Again, in my book, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, I have 3 different chapters on how different Christians used entheogens in different times and places. So I'm not saying Christians weren't using entheogens. What I'm saying is they were using entheogens, and they wrote openly about this, and it wasn't a secret that anyone was doing this, and that despite all of that, nobody ever said anything about there being a mushroom in Christian art. And now, unfortunately, again, if I would have had the slides to show you, I could very easily demonstrate how they are just trees by showing you other trees from medieval manuscripts, from secular manuscripts, not from Christian manuscripts, from secular manuscripts. The trees all look the same. It was just a style based on the Parasol of Victory. Again, just Google Assyrian or Babylonian parasol. You'll see what I'm talking about.
We've got another anonymous question here. What's with the anonymous questions? Come on, people. We're all friends here.
Yeah, right. Come on.
Can you comment on the monopolization of growing psilocybin mushrooms in Oregon as proposed by the Oregon Psilocybin Society draft ballot, title IP34?
If that were what I were here to do, sure, but I'm not. If you'd like to email me at psychedelicwitch.com, we can talk about it.
Has Oregon legalized mushrooms now?
No, we have a ballot initiative for 2020, and I'm with the questioner. That's a great question. Let me just say, and I don't mean to dismiss you. I would love to have that conversation with you. I really would. It's just that's not what we're here to do. Please, again, psychedelicwitch.com. Just say that you were the one that asked that question. I would really love to hear from you. I want to hear it from anybody who has any criticisms or thoughts or ideas or anything about the Portland 2020 initiative. Please get in touch, please.
Portland could use some more mushrooms the last time I was there. Everyone seemed kind of grumpy.
No, we're great out here. Portlanders are fun.
What's that? Portlanders?
Portlanders are fun.
That's right. As long as you're not fascist.
Yeah. Anything else? Or...
we got no more questions up right now.
Okay.
Can you give me? Can you give us some rundowns of perhaps some mushroom religions? Is there any evidence of those, or have you found any cultures that were using the mushroom as a religion? Or
that's kind of what I was going to ask. Is there examples? Did you find examples in writing or art of different cultures?
Sure. That's a great question. So in my book, I write about there is this vase that was found in an Anos. Anos was an area of Thrace, which today we would call Turkey. And it was found in this graveyard, and it does seem to show a person adding what very much to me looks like a mushroom to a vat of wine. So I would say that, and it's believed to have been a Dionysian jug. So it's probable that this particular group of Dionysus worshipers absolutely utilized the mushroom. I mean, that's totally possible. What you find in the ancient world is not so much religions based on any specific substance. They didn't really see substances back then the way we see them today. It was a different kind of thing. The substance, if a substance were to be used, let's say in a pagan mystery rite, it could potentially change over time. Like, let's say they normally used opium, but there's no opium, but holy shit, this caravan just came in and somebody's got mushrooms. Okay, well, we can't not do the ceremony. We're going to use mushrooms instead, you know? Like, it seems to have been more like that what was going on in the ancient world. They didn't. Plutarch writes about an ivy that causes wineless drunkenness. Now, we don't know, there's no kind of ivy that we know about that causes intoxication. So it is possible, perhaps because of the mycelium network, that Plutarch was referring to a mushroom as ivy. Now, again, I don't know. It's possible.
what about that almost sounds like, I guess I'm thinking vine. When you said ivy, I thought vine, which would make me think of like ayahuasca or something like that.
Yeah,
They weren't there yet?
Well, let's just say that in ancient Greeks, they had Icarus, but not Icaros. Meaning the kid who tried to fly towards the sun with wings and he got burnt up, that was Icarus.
Yeah.
So they had Icarus, but not Icaros, meaning the songs, the ayahuasca songs.
We got another question in the chats.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. It just says, thank you very much, Thomas and host. I have to go to work.
Oh, have fun at work. Thanks for coming.
Seems like a weird thing to do. Just go right from your psilocybin summit to go to work when you really just want to eat some mushrooms. Do you have like a specific ritual you do when you're doing a session, or would you be willing to share what your sort of regiment is?
It's weird. Could I show something else instead?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So in my book, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, remember I was talking about how I found, oh wow, sometimes you open right up to the page. I found evidence for a mushroom. I think it might be a mushroom in a text. Here's what I'm talking about, and I'll put it up to the camera so you can see. This is not in any Christian book. It's not a devotional work or anything like that. It's just a medical treatise. To write my book, The Witch's Ointment, I had to translate all these different medical treatises. And so in this one in particular, something struck out to me. This is from the Liber de Venenos, which is the Book of Poisons. It was originally drafted in the 1420s. Now, the copy I used was from 1492. This copyist, I hypothesized, might have eaten mushrooms and shown us in a rather striking and beautiful way. Here's what happens. In this book on these different medical plants and medical animals as well, there's a title, right, of what they're talking about, let's say henbane or something, right? And, or whatever, St. John's wort. They all the titles look very plain. Then you get to something like opium. Hold on a second. And you see there's that embellishment on the O.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that doesn't appear on any other entry in this volume, except for one. Now, keep in mind, that is the most elaborate looking drug in this manual, until we get to mushrooms. You see that? Look, there's flowers on it.
Oh, wow.
You see this? That says fungus, mushrooms. This looks like a medieval hippie druid. since no other image in this text looks so decorative like that, I can't help but think that this person, whoever she was, ate mushrooms and decided to just say, hey, I'm going to make the mushroom entry in my manuscript look cool.
But
So,
is the manuscript description pretty vanilla?
So here's the problem with the manuscript description. Yes, it's very vanilla. For what of it I can read, this is what's known as Latin script. I cannot read Latin script. I mean, I can make out a little bit, but I can read like Latin, like when the words are all spelled out. This is, so, okay, you know, like text message language, like see you later, L8R? That's actually what you're looking at when you look at Latin script. You're looking at a shortened version of saying stuff because parchment was so expensive. So you could either write out this whole word, or you could just put the first few letters of the word and make a little design at the end that lets you know where that word is, you know, what that word is supposed to be. That's Latin script, and again, I don't read it very well at all. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were saying something.
Was I?
You were.
Well, we have a question from the thing here, but I don't think it's a question for you. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask the question, and hopefully Daniel will chime in the chats and answer it for us. It says from Zachary, I'm really sorry if this has been addressed, but can this lecture be found for re-listening? I have attended the rest of the talks, and all of a sudden my DNS settings got fucked up, so I've spent the last half hour trying to fix them and just got in. Effing technology. Hey, we've been having some technology problems of ourselves in
I hear
the
you, buddy.
presentation, Zach,
I hear you, man.
so don't worry about it. Well, I had asked you just before that what your sort of ritual was.
Well, it depends on what I'm going for. Let's say I'm going to do some art magic. I'll eat my mushrooms, and I then meditate for about 20 minutes or so. The reason I do this is twofold. One, it takes even an experienced meditator about 20 minutes to reach a deep
the drop zone. Yeah.
What's that?
The drop zone.
Yeah, exactly, the drop zone. Thank you. And also, as it turns out, it takes about 20 minutes to a half hour for mushrooms to start kicking in. And so what I'll do is this. Once I feel the mushrooms start to have their effect on me, I'll switch from meditation to visualization, and I'll visualize what it is that I want to accomplish that day. The reason I wait for the mushrooms to start having an effect before I visualize is because it's very difficult to hold a visualization space when, you know, mushrooms are firing, you know, off in your brain. So it's like adding extra weights to a barbell when I do, at least for me. Then I will invoke the muses, of course. And the muses, if anyone's interested, love, you don't have to do a traditional banishing or anything like that. Just get a bunch of white and pink flower petals. They love flower petals. Yellows are great too. And just throw them around your room. And then, hold on a second, because you asked. We take our wheat bundle, or for those people interested in tarot, this would be my blade. You make 3 pentacles in the air saying, Adorai muses, dearte animai mi intrat, which is, I adore you muses, goddesses of creativity, enter my soul. And then I get to work.
Fascinating. I should actually add more reverence to mine.
Yeah.
The last time I found a YouTube video, and I got lost up in that for a little while. But that was fun too. You know, it was almost a little recreational, I guess. I mean, that's the thing with mushrooms is sometimes they go either way. Sometimes I just get stuck in the scoop where I just want to lie on the couch and rock out.
Yeah, and let me also say one of the most important things about doing creativity magic, you actually see the fruits of the spell like days or even a week afterward. Like, it's not going to be instantaneous, but you still want to get up and tackle whatever project you were working on. Even if it's not even doing anything like just, I mean, you're on mushrooms, just feel the project, just get in, just cuddle it. I mean, if you're working on a song or something, just sit there, just hold your guitar and feel it as another presence in the room, as this maker of this beautiful music that the two of you are going to make together. If only you weren't on mushroom. No, kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, just, it's just about being in that space, being in that psychedelic art space, or what I would call a poetogenic space. You know, just being with it and focusing your intention on it and making sure that you do take some action and actually manifesting it.
Was there any other examples of art of mushrooms in different cultures or writing?
Oh, yeah,
Going way
there's
back,
plenty.
like, was there any comparisons that would also help you say, hey, well, they were also in this culture, they were putting it in their art, they were talking about it all the time?
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So let's go to the other side of the world from Europe. And where there are those very famous little mushroom statues from the Mayan civilization that once thrived in Guatemala. I'm sure that a lot of you have all seen these statues. Now, the thing is about these mushroom statues, and what I like about them and why I'm like, yeah, they're mushroom statues, is that we don't just have the statues. We also have the Popol Vuh, which is a document that describes mushroom use written in the Mayan society, the very society that produced those statues. So that's what I mean earlier when I was talking about corroborating evidence. That's how we know those little mushroom statues are mushrooms, because we have corroborating evidence. There's not just the Popol Vuh. There's also Bernardino de Sahagún's La Historia Universal de las Cosas de Nueva España from, I think, the 15th or 16th century, which describes the peyote and tobacco and mushroom use of the Aztecs. There's the Codex Magliabechiano that also describes the mushroom use of the Aztecs. There are other examples of this practice recorded by bewildered conquistadors. All of that is corroborating evidence. All of that is evidence outside the art that makes it plausible or probable that those are mushrooms. And what I'm saying here, and thank you for asking that question, is we don't have anything like that in Christianity. There's nothing. Another thing I should also point out, that when all of these guys were writing about this mushroom practice in Mesoamerica, it's as if they'd never heard of doing this in their whole life. Just read the accounts. They are baffled by this. Bernardino de Sahagún, I mean, he was a priestly man. He exactly the kind of person who would have known about the holy mushroom. And when you read his writings, he doesn't say anything about it. Two, like I said, this has never even occurred to any of these people.
And with that, we're about out of time, Thomas. So without presentation or not, you did a fantastic job of filling the time. We've got the next guest up in about 5 minutes, so we will back out of here and we'll turn things back over to Daniel and his fantastic psilocybin conference. Thank you very much, Thomas. That was fantastic. It's great to chat to you again. Let's get you back on Grimerica real soon.
I'd love to. Yeah.
I'll text you. Now I got your number. You can't get away from me.
No,
thanks, everybody, for joining.
Yeah, thanks, guys, so much. This was great.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Peace.